Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
On the outskirts of the national capital today, black limousines with darkened windows converged on a hotel where private security guards imposed ironclad control. The limos carried royalty, political power brokers, and industrial titans to a secret meeting that will last all weekend. It's known as the Bilderberg Group. Could their objective be world domination?
We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era.
in the near future. Earth is dominated by a powerful world government. Once free nations are slaves to the will of a tiny elite. The dawn of a new dark age is upon mankind. Countries are a thing of the past. Every form of independence is under attack, with the family and even the individual itself nearing extinction. Close to 80% of the Earth's population has been eliminated. The remnants of a once free humanity are forced to live within highly controlled, compact, prison-like cities. Travel is highly restricted. Superhighways connect the megacities and keep the population from entering into unauthorized zones. No human activity is private. AI supercomputers chronicle and categorize every action. A prison planet dominated by a ruthless gang of control freaks, whose power can never be challenged. This is the vision of the global elite, their goal. A program of total dehumanization, where the science of tyranny is law. A worldwide control grid, designed to ensure the overlord's monopoly of power forever. Our species will be condemned to this nightmare future unless the masses are awakened to the New World Order master plan and mobilized to defeat it.
In 1775, the American Revolutionary War began. 1775, the American Revolutionary War began as the American colonies sought to detach from England and its oppressive monarchy. Though many reasons are cited for the revolution, one in particular sticks out as the prime cause: that King George III of England outlawed the interest-free, independent currency the colonies were producing and using for themselves, in turn forcing them to borrow money from the Central Bank of England at interest, immediately putting the colonies into debt. And as Benjamin Franklin later wrote, the refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. In 1783, America won its independence from England. However, its battle against the central bank concept and the corrupt, greed-filled men associated with it had just begun. So what is a central bank? A central bank is an institution that produces the currency of an entire nation. Based on historical precedent, two specific powers are inherent in central banking practice: the control of interest rates and the control of the money supply, or inflation. The central bank does not simply supply a government's economy with money, it loans it to them at interest. Then, through the use of increasing and decreasing the supply of money, the central bank regulates the value of the currency being issued. It is critical to understand that the entire structure of this system can only produce one thing in the long run: debt. It doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure this scam out. For every single dollar produced by the central bank is loaned at interest. That means every single dollar produced is actually the dollar plus a certain percent of debt based on that dollar. And since the central bank has the monopoly over the production of the currency for the entire country, and they loan each dollar out with immediate debt attached to it, where does the money to pay for the debt come from? It can only come from the central bank again, which means the central bank has to perpetually increase its money supply to temporarily cover the outstanding debt created, which in turn, since that new money is loaned out at interest as well, creates even more debt. The end result of this system without fail is slavery, for it is impossible for the government and thus the public to ever come out of the self-generating debt. The founding fathers of this country were well aware of this. By the early 20th century, the U.S. had already implemented and removed a few central banking systems, which were swindled into place by ruthless banking interests. At this time, the dominant families in the banking and business world were the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds. And in the early 1900s, they sought to push once again legislation to create another central bank. However, they knew the government and public were very weary of such an institution, so they needed to create an incident to affect public opinion. So, J.P. Morgan, publicly considered a financial luminary at the time, exploited his mass influence by publishing rumors that a prominent bank in New York was insolvent or bankrupt. Morgan knew this would cause mass hysteria, which would affect other banks as well. And it did. The public, in fear of losing their deposits, immediately began mass withdrawals. Consequently, the banks were forced to call in their loans, causing the recipients to sell their property, and thus a spiral of bankruptcies, repossessions, and turmoil emerged. Putting the pieces together a few years later, Frederick Allen of Life magazine wrote, "The Morgan interests took advantage to precipitate the panic, guiding it shrewdly as it progressed." Unaware of the fraud, the Panic of 1907 led to a congressional investigation headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich, who had intimate ties to the banking cartels and later became part of the Rockefeller family through marriage. The commission, led by Aldrich, recommended a central bank should be implemented so a panic like 1907 could never happen again. This was the spark the international bankers needed to initiate their plan. In 1910, a secret meeting was held at a J.P. Morgan estate on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. It was there that the central banking bill called the Federal Reserve Act was written. This legislation was written by bankers, not lawmakers. This meeting was so secretive, so concealed from government and public knowledge that the 10 or so figures who attended disguised their names when en route to the island. After this bill was constructed, it was then handed over to their political frontman, Senator Nelson Aldrich, to push through Congress. And in 1913, with heavy political sponsorship by the bankers, Woodrow Wilson became president, having already agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act in exchange for campaign support. And 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson in turn made it law. Years later, Woodrow Wilson wrote, in regret, Congressman Louis McFadden also expressed the truth after the passage of the bill. A world banking system was being set up here, a superstate controlled by international bankers, acting together to enslave the world for their own pleasure. The Fed has usurped the government. Now, the public was told that the Federal Reserve System was an economic stabilizer, and inflation and economic crises were a thing of the past. Well, as history has shown, nothing is further from the truth. The fact is, the international bankers now had a streamlined machine to expand their personal ambitions.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
For example, from 1914 to 1919, the Fed increased the money supply by nearly 100%, resulting in extensive loans to small banks and the public. Then, in 1920, the Fed called in mass percentages of the outstanding money supply, thus resulting in the supporting banks having to call in huge numbers of loans, and just like 1907, bank runs, bankruptcy, and collapse occurred. Over 5,400 competitive banks outside of the Federal Reserve System collapsed, further consolidating the monopoly of the small group of international bankers. Privy to this crime, Congressman Lindbergh stepped up and said in 1921, "Under the Federal Reserve Act, panics are scientifically created. The present panic is the first scientifically created one, worked out as we figure a mathematical equation." However, the panic of 1920 was just a warm-up. From 1921 to 1929, the Fed again increased the money supply, resulting once again in extensive loans to the public and banks. There was also a fairly new type of loan called a margin loan in the stock market. Very simply, the margin loan allowed an investor to put down only 10% of a stock's price, with the other 90% being loaned through the broker. In other words, a person could own $1,000 worth of stock with only $100 down. This method was very popular in the roaring 1920s, as everyone seemed to be making money in the market. However, there was a catch to this loan. It could be called in at any time and had to be paid within 24 hours. This is termed a margin call, and the typical result of a margin call is the selling of the stock purchased with the loan. So, a few months before October in 1929, J.D. Rockefeller, Bernard Baruch, and other insiders quietly exited the market. And on October 24, 1929, the New York financiers who furnished the margin loans started calling them in masse. This sparked an instantaneous, massive sell-off in the market, for everyone had to cover the margin loans. It then triggered mass bank runs for the same reason, in turn collapsing over 16,000 banks, enabling the conspiring international bankers to not only buy up rival banks at a discount, but to also buy up whole corporations at pennies on the dollar. It was the greatest robbery in American history. But that didn't stop there. Rather than expanding the money supply in order to recover from this economic collapse, the Fed actually contracted it, fueling one of the largest depressions in history. Once again outraged, Congressman Louis McFadden, a longtime opponent of the banking cartels, began bringing impeachment proceedings against the Federal Reserve Board, saying of the crash and depression, it was a carefully contrived occurrence. International bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair so that they might emerge the rulers of us all. Not surprisingly, and after 2 previous assassination attempts, McFadden was poisoned at a banquet before he could push for the impeachment. Now, having reduced the society to squalor, the Federal Reserve bankers decided that the gold standard should be removed. In order to do this, they needed to acquire the remaining gold in the system. So, under the pretense of helping to end the Depression, came the 1933 gold seizure. Under the threat of imprisonment for 10 years, everyone in America was required to turn in all gold bullion to the Treasury, essentially robbing the public of what little wealth they had left. And at the end of 1933, the gold standard was abolished. If you look at a dollar bill from before 1933, it says it is redeemable in gold. You look at a dollar bill today, it says it is legal tender, which means it is backed by absolutely nothing. It is worthless paper. The only thing that gives our money value is how much of it is in circulation. Therefore, the power to regulate the money supply is also the power to regulate its value, which is also the power to bring entire economies and societies to its knees.
They create money out of nothing. What a scam. They have so much money, they don't care about money. All they care about is power. All they care about is being able to control the political situation so it goes their way.
After a man has far more money than he possibly can spend for pleasures, what is left to excite him? For those with a ruling class mentality, the answer is power, raw power over other human beings. Money can buy such power only to a point. Beyond that, politics is the sport, and world politics is the ultimate game.
On the outskirts of the national capital today, black limousines with darkened windows converged on a hotel where private security guards imposed ironclad control. The limos carried royalty, political power brokers, and industrial titans to a secret meeting that will last all weekend. It's known as the Bilderberg Group. Could their objective be world domination?
If you haven't heard of the Bilderbergers, it's for one reason only. They haven't wanted you to. At their annual closed-door meetings, no outsiders are allowed even close to the building. Here are gathered the most powerful individuals of the Western world, united regularly at club meetings. Yet nothing is reported by the New York Times, the Washington Post, or the LA Times.
What really fascinates me is the complete blackout in the American press. For more than 20 years, I've gone down to the press club every day. I check the wires in their library, mingle with other paper boys, and I asked them the question many times, why, when if 120 film stars or 120 NFL football players met behind locked and guarded doors at a remote location for 3 days, you'd try very hard to penetrate and find out what those movie stars or football players are doing. Well, I had no curiosity at all when 120 of the world's most powerful financial leaders and political leaders meet for 3 days in a remote location behind armed guards in a complete blackout. Well, I had no curiosity.
The people who call conspiracy theorists are not the conspiracy theorists themselves. We're talking about facts here. The Bilderberg Group does exist. The Federal Reserve does exist. The people who are members of the Bilderberg Group are also the people who do control the Federal Reserve. These are all facts.
In 1954, the elite of the planet met in secret at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. The Bilderberg Group would later admit that their mission was the formation of the EU. Once the EU was established, under the guise of trade deals, a North American Union and Asian Union would be formed. The three interlocking superstates formed the core of the global government, while the United Nations would serve as a world regulatory and enforcement body over the Third World subregions. The Bilderberg Group consists of the heads of all of the managing roundtable groups that steer individual countries. Picture the elite power structure of the world as a giant pyramid, with only the elite of the elite at the tip-top of the capstone. The group has been so secretive that until the mid-1980s, the controlled corporate media denied its existence. Into the late 1990s, coverage only consisted of rare one-line mentions. With the rise of the alternative media, their stranglehold on information has begun to slip.
What we do hear coming out of those meetings is incredible about the plans of the New World Order to consolidate power. Political power and economic power coming together at the highest level. But what I call the lapdog media, the controlled media in this country, you would think that they would be going to court, crying freedom of information, open meetings, sunshine law, and all of these things, but the silence is deafening.
Why is it the major media would deny this? Let's look at the ownership of the major media. Let's look at the roster of, say, the Bilderberg meeting. Katharine Graham owns the Washington Post. Katharine Graham has been to the Bilderbergers. Conrad Black, one of the largest media barons in Canada and Europe, has not only been to these meetings, but he has hosted the meeting just a few years ago.
Every year they meet in secret, and there is an absolute news blackout. There is never anything reported in any of those papers.
David Rockefeller himself thanked the media for keeping this all hushed up.
first heard about Bilderberg in 1975, and I said, I don't believe it. That's not possible. Who in hell's Bilderberg? I spent 20 happy years with metropolitan newspapers. All the wires are clicking at my ear. That could not happen without me knowing about it. And the thing that first impressed me most was columns in 1957 by the late, great Westbrook Pegler, widely syndicated columnist. He wrote 2 lengthy columns about how approximately 100 leaders of international finance, heads of state, high public officials were meeting behind armed guards and closed doors on Jekyll Island, sealed off. What are these powerful internationalists doing? And why is it so secret? Why do they have armed guards outside? Why is it sealed off? The newspapers totally ignore it. Not a word. Total blackout in the United States. Since then, I've never stopped pursuing Bilderberg, or the whole international gangster organization led by Rockefellers and Rothschilds as they manipulate the world for their own selfish interest.
About 10 have come in. They've been coming in slowly in typically big black cars with what appears to be bulletproof glass, and we've got a few pictures of some of the people. We're being kept well back from the building by an awful lot of security people. But, you know, there'll be more security as this thing develops.
Again, just a reminder to stay off the property, okay?
I am. This is the line. We checked with the city.
Oh, yeah, there's one right there. Hi. Hey, we're not your property. We're not your slaves. We're going to defeat the New World Order. The New World Order is going to be defeated. You realize that? I'm glad you do. Always does throughout history.
Now, I think what is very difficult for most people to understand is how such a small group of 125 men and a few women control a population base of 6 billion people. Actually, it's much easier than you think. These people work on what I call systemic methodology, meaning that you take a pie, just imagine you take an apple pie and you slice this apple pie into lots of very small pieces, and you put in front of each one of these pieces your men or women of trust. And by controlling this individual, you control an entire organization. For example, if you take Paul Wolfowitz, who runs the World Bank, through him you can control the entire organization. You don't need to control what the dishwasher or the toilet cleaner thinks or does or believes in. You just need to control what he does and what he believes in. And what he does will permeate the entire organization. And that's how you control, with very, very small power base, an entire global population of 6 billion people.
Bilderberg is making great progress toward a world government. They have created a superstate in Europe called the European Union. They're intent on creating a Western Hemisphere Union called the American Union. NAFTA is to be expanded into every country in this hemisphere. As NAFTA expands, it will take on the role of the American Union. And only an educated, informed public can stop them in their tracks.
In 2005, an arrangement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States was made. This arrangement, unannounced to the public, unregulated by Congress, merges the United States, Mexico, and Canada into one entity, erasing all borders. It's called the North American Union, and you might want to ask yourself why you've never heard of this. In fact, there is only one mainstream reporter who has actually heard of and has had the courage to cover this issue.
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
It's a deal that few have even heard of.
It's being done again by very few people at the very top on behalf of the investment class, but the working class of people, political officials across our country, from communities, from cities and so forth, they don't know anything about this.
This isn't some trade agreement. It is a total removal of sovereignty from these countries, which will also result in a completely new currency called the Amero.
Fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about, but I think it's going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
By default of this agreement, the American Constitution will eventually be obsolete. You would think that a situation like this would be on the cover of every major newspaper. That is until you realize that the people who are behind this movement are the same people behind the mainstream media, and you are not told what you're not supposed to know. The North American Union is the same concept as the European Union, the African Union, and the soon-to-be Asian Union, and the same people are behind all of them. And, when the time is right, the North American Union, the European Union, the African Union, and the Asian Union will be merged together, forming the final stages of a plan these men have been working on for over 60 years. A one-world government.
A globalist is someone who believes in globalism, and globalism essentially is the desire for one world government, one world military, one world economy, which on a broad philosophical basis may not be that bad. But the problem is that we are being pushed into globalism by secrecy and by deceit. And nobody's getting a chance to actually consider the ramifications or consider the methodology that's being used to push us into this globalization. And that leads to the $64,000 question. Let's assume that these globalists, and they make no secret about their desire for one world economy, one world government, let's assume that they're successful. What is our guarantee that some new Hitler-like tyrant won't gain control of that worldwide mechanism? The driving force behind globalism is just plain old socialism. Because if they want to control every person in the world, if they're going to take care of you from cradle to grave, if they're going to take care of the education system, they're going to take care of the health system, all of that requires central administration. And the wealthy elite who have the money and the power know that if they can create a one world global social system, that they can control the central authority. In other words, world control, world domination, one of the oldest desires in the history of the world, going all the way back to Alexander the Great.
The way that this can be done with a very few people, at the peak, that is because if you look at every organization today, be it a university, a school, a government, a secret society, anything, a multinational company, business of any kind, they're structured as a pyramid, which works like this. In any organization, you've got a very, very few people at the peak of the pyramid. That very few people know exactly what that organization's about, what its real agenda is, what it's really trying to achieve. The further you come down from that peak in any organization, you're meeting more and more and more people who know less and less and less and less about what the organization's really about. They only know their part. The CIA call this compartmentalization, keeping from everyone else in the pyramid how what they're doing in apparent innocence links in with what other people are doing in apparent innocence to produce a very sinister pattern. The Freemasons are a classic example of this. When you say that the Freemason secret society is involved, people think that you must be saying that every Freemason wants to manipulate the world to global dictatorship. Utterly ridiculous. Of course they don't. But if you look at the Freemason structure, the vast overwhelming majority of Freemasons in the world they never get higher than the bottom 3 levels of degree, the overwhelming majority. But in the Scottish rite of Freemasonry, which pervades much of world politics, particularly in America and other areas, there's another 30 degrees above that, to the 33rd degree, which the vast majority of Freemasons never get near. And there's another 13 levels not officially accepted to exist, which some people call Illuminati degrees, which at that level, the Freemason secret society is in a different universe to the part where the vast majority of Freemasons exist, right down here. Compartmentalization. This is how it works. So every one of these institutions that control the direction of the world and our daily lives is a pyramid. The banking system is a pyramid. You go into the local bank, the person you meet across the counter won't even know what's going on in the bank manager's office behind them, let alone what's going on at board level and higher. So the banking system is a pyramid going to a peak. The intelligence agency network in the world is a pyramid going to a peak. The multinational company network is a pyramid. So is the global media, and so on. And there is a global pyramid within which all these work, in which the peaks of all these individual pyramids, banking, business, media, etc., fuse into one peak. And up there, it's speculated by many people, there perhaps may be no more than 13 families, 13 people at the peak, pervading down through these different levels the same basic policy, which is pushing the world towards more and more centralization of power. There is this like cozy little myth that is perpetuated between politicians and the media. Politicians walk the world stage as if they are the final arbiters of power in the world. So when a president speaks, the cameras run and it's flashed around the world, prime ministers and such like. The media report the world as if presidents and prime ministers are the final arbiters and decision makers in the world, which means that the people above the level of presidents and prime ministers that really make the decisions, they're never looked at or exposed by the mainstream media because they're not accepted to exist.
Well, I was in the FBI for 27 and a half years, and at the time of my retirement in 1979, I was the senior special agent in charge of the FBI Los Angeles office. I developed information personally about just extensive corruption in the government, not only at the federal level, but all the way down to the city and state level across this country. I have information about corrupt judges, corrupt law enforcement, prosecutors, county officials, judges. It involves drugs, involves pornography, involves prostitution, it involves occults, pedophilia. The bottom line is to take over the country and the world.
For what, though?
Power, greed. This goes back over 200 years, back to 1776, with the establishment of an organization known as the Illuminati. And if your listeners don't know what the Illuminati is, they need to run down to the library and look it up and do some research, because on May the 1st, 1776, a fellow named Adam Weishaupt, German, set forth 25 goals at the request of the Rothschild group that they needed to initiate in order to take over the world. We're talking about destroy the sovereignty of countries and destroy religions. And that's where it really started in modern day. And right today, believe it or not, and we have the documentation for this, we are probably 90%, their goals have probably been filled at the great rate of about 90%.
This Illuminati, this group who called themselves the Enlightened Ones, had gained positions of power through control of the banking system.
The Illuminati was founded on May 1st, 1776, by Adam Weishaupt, a professor at Ingolstadt University. Weishaupt obviously had been a serious student of the occult, for many of its bizarre features and symbols were incorporated into his organization. Weishaupt had been active in the Masonic lodges of Germany, and found in them the perfect vehicle for recruiting into his secret order, which he described publicly as the highest level of Freemasonry. The Illuminati was formally incorporated into the Masonic lodges at the Congress of Wilhelmsbad in 1780. There were 8 conspiratorial rings within rings, advancing from the outermost novice inward to Rex, or king. The king, of course, was Weishaupt himself, who had adopted the code name Spartacus. Those in the outer rings were told that the grand purpose of the order was to make of the human race, without any distinction of nation, condition, or profession, one good and happy family. But by the time the member had advanced to the level of presbyter, or priest, his oath of absolute secrecy and obedience had become deadly serious. Only then was he allowed finally to see the ultimate goal of the order. It was the destruction of all religion and the destruction of all independent governments, replaced by a new world order, a world government ruled from behind the scenes by the illuminated ones.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
I call upon all states to join ranks in order to found the new world order of the 21st century.
And people talked then, in 1990, of a new world order. What they actually meant then was a new political order. And the question for us is how we meet and master all these challenges to ensure that Britain enhances its competitiveness in the process and realizes what I believe is our destiny of success in this new world order. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges for the future.
On the back of the dollar bill, you see the symbol on the left-hand side of the bill, which is annuit coeptus, which means our enterprise is now a success, or our enterprise is crowned with success. Annuit coeptus. So you say, fine, so you have an enterprise and is now crowned with success. What enterprise are you talking about? Novas ordo seclorum. Novas is novice, meaning new. Ordo is order, and seclorum is where we get the word secular, meaning the world. So it's new order of the world, the new world order. George Bush's new world order is now a success.
Bill, you've heard an awful lot of dramatic speeches and seen dramatic moments in times of great gravity for the nation. How would you assess this evening?
This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order.
1934 is when the Federal Reserve actually finally took total control of the United States monetary system, and that's when they said it is now a success, because this is a symbol, this is an emblem of a secret society of Freemasons called the Illuminati, the German Bavarian Illuminati. They were a secret society founded in the south of Germany. They were called the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, the enlightened ones. 1776 was when this secret society actually formed itself into a secret society and put itself into operation. They were the basis for what we call today in our country the Bavarian Illuminati was the basis for what we call today the Colombian faction. The Colombian faction of the Illuminati came here right after this government was formed, and that's where we get today Columbia Space Shuttle, Columbia Movies, Columbia Television, Columbia Records, everything, Columbia University. As a matter of fact, Columbia TV, Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS. What is the symbol for CBS? It's the all-seeing eye. And that's why our government is in the District of Columbia, because these guys own our government. They print our money, and they own not only the government, but they own you. You are their property. So in other words, these guys print the money, they run the country, and they own you, and they own everything around it. And so they make the laws, and that's why they can decide who can kill who, and who can get away with who, and who can get away with whatever, because they make the laws and they decide, all right? As I said to you before, there are 13 layers in this pyramid. There are 13 letters in Coeptus, but 13 is a very important number to this secret society. There are 13 stripes, there are 13 stars here, which make up the Star of David. The 13 berries, there are 13 leaves, 13 arrows. There are 32 feathers here and 33 feathers there. Everything is done in a sequence of 13. 13, of course, is based on, this is what we call Masonic symbolism. Freemasons designed this dollar bill. Everything is done in a sequence of 13, and again, I draw your attention to the fact that you have 13 stars here, which collectively make up the Star of David. There's a reason why. On the $1 bill at the top, you'll see this little image right here. But if you blow it up from an actual photograph, you'll see it is it's a little owl. It's a symbol of the Bohemian Society. The Bohemian Society meets in California on the last 2 weeks of July of every year. On the $1 bill at the top, you'll see this little image right here. But if you blow it up from an actual photograph, you'll see it is it's a little owl. It's a symbol of the Bohemian Society. The Bohemian Society meets in California on the last 2 weeks of July of every year. I have pictures showing all of the presidents, all of the living presidents, excluding the new one, but all of the living presidents at Bohemian Grove in Northern California, and they're all wearing red and black Ku Klux Klan dress type of regalia, like the Ku Klux Klanners, with the pointed headdress and everything. And I mean, that's quite a sight to see presidents dressed like Ku Klux Klan members, right? And they're standing in front of a big open pit of fire, and behind them is about a 20 to 25 foot owl behind them. And the article in Elm magazine and Time magazine, I've got 2 or 3 different magazines showing basically the same pictures. It says that the presidents meet with all of the heads of industry throughout the world, all of the heads of state throughout the world, and all of the most important wheeler dealers in this country, and they all meet up in Northern California, and they have rituals where they go before the owl after midnight. And what a picture you got, with all the presidents dressed up like Ku Klux Klanners with black and red robes on before an owl, and these are your presidents of this country. And the reason why they chose the owl is because the owl is a symbol used in Europe by secret societies, because the owl is wise, because it sees things in the dark. And the implication is, of course, that's why they are where they are, because they're very brilliant and they know things that you don't know.
Our story begins in Northern California over 100 years ago, when locals began to spread rumors of bizarre occult rituals being conducted in the ancient redwood groves of Sonoma County. As the decades passed, it became clear these incredible stories had a basis in truth, and their source was a 2,700-acre private club known as the Bohemian Grove. Then, in a time period between the mid-1970s and the early 1990s, scores of reporters attempted to infiltrate the Grove. All attempts were unsuccessful. Grove security identified them, threw them out for trespassing, or in some cases, had the local police arrest them. To many, it seemed the Grove's secrets would never become public. All of that changed on July 15th, 2000, when we ripped aside the veil of secrecy and were successfully able to penetrate the Bohemian Grove on their high holy day and videotape the cremation of care ritual. Our infiltration is chronicled in my documentary film, Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove. As the news spread across the planet that the Bohemian Grove had been blown wide open and that their secrets were public, the people were amazed. They were amazed to learn that many U.S. presidents and British prime ministers, German chancellors, the Hollywood elite, the heads of business and academia, Federal Reserve chairmen were traveling to the Grove each year, and that presidents had been going there since the turn of the last century in 1900. They were shocked by each new revelation of ritualistic depravity.
When will you learn? Wow. Prince of all mortal wisdom, Owl of Bohemia, we beseech thee, grant us thy counsel.
One last question. I read a Washington Times article many years ago where you had a comment about the organization, and then now it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in a lot of different newspapers, and that's the Bohemian Grove. And back in, 1996, when you joined as a Clinton advisor, the Republicans were criticizing you, oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, hey, I don't run around in the woods naked. What did that mean?
Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, I didn't run around naked like they do.
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen, I am a happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there, and it's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I'm Alex Jones, and I snuck in there in 2000. I'm the guy that blew it wide open and got the video. It's been on national TV.
Well, I disrespect you for that.
You do?
I do.
But it's a lot of big public officials going in there. Don't we deserve to know?
I don't know anything about you, and I don't know anything about your film. But if you go in there with an understanding, you violated that understanding by releasing that film, and I don't respect you for that.
Really? But we have public officials.
I'm sorry. You took an understanding when you went in there that you would not do that film, and did you have an understanding when you went in there?
No.
Did you crash it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has no trespassing signs there too, doesn't it?
No, they put them up after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just walked in.
I'm sorry, sir. I've been there before. I know what the circumstances are, and I'm sorry you violated the understandings. That was not a gentlemanly thing to do.
But what about the ritual? Is the ritual gentlemanly?
Sir, everything. I don't owe you this comment.
I know. I appreciate
it. This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you and goodbye.
Been in the ritual?
That's none of your damn business.
Oh,
that's right. Listen. You go around and make understandings with people and violate them. You ambush people on the streets, and that's inappropriate form of journalism. If you wish to practice that, that's fine, but don't ask others to respect you for it. If you want to, you can do. You're a free American, like anything you want. If you want to be uncivil and rude and ungentlemanly, that's up to you. But don't expect the rest of us to say, "Oh well, you're
there, Mr. Gergen."
I'm sorry, nobody sets policy in there. We try to be gentlemen, and obviously, you don't belong there.
Weaving spiders come out here. Yeah, that is a three-pointer. Woo!
Look how strangely he behaved when we brought it up. Why is he acting so secretive? And why did he get so angry when he discovered that we'd snuck in? You see, they take it very, very seriously. This is one of the hallmarks of the occult and secret societies. The word occult means secret. Secrecy is part of their religion. They revel in it. And when it's violated, they become extremely angry. Our social lives, going to the football game or the PTA, a little bit different than your average world leader or corporation chief. No, in their spare time, they worship Moloch and do mock human sacrifices. We just need to get used to that and accept them as our leaders. Think about it. If your neighbor was engaging in mock human sacrifices to Moloch, the demon idol that was worshipped all over the Mediterranean and the Middle East, Would you let that neighbor walk your dog or house sit, or how about babysit your children, or be in control of the nuclear launch codes? Well, let me give you a revelation. They are in control of the national deficit, of Congress, of your bank account, of your local police department, and they see you as cattle, as their slaves.
At this stage, and a stone in between at the churches.
Witnessed some kind of secondary follow-up explosion.
10 o'clock Eastern time this morning, just collapsing on itself. We have no idea what caused this.
Right now, police have to determine is whether that explosion was caused from the initial impact of the plane or whether it was something that was exploded on the ground. Generally speaking, for a building to collapse in on itself like that, it would seem to indicate that there could have been an explosion, a bomb planted on the ground that would make the building collapse within itself.
If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
The Twin Towers were composed of 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, 103 elevators, 43,600 windows, 60,000 tons of cooling equipment, and a 360-foot television antenna. The core of each tower was 87 by 133 feet, comprised of 47 box columns 36 by 16 inches thick. Were the Twin Towers brought down as a result of the airplanes that struck them and the fires that followed, or were they brought down in a controlled demolition? Where would people get an idea like that?
Pancake theory, according to which the fires, while not melting the steel, heated it up sufficiently to cause the floors weakened by the airplane strikes to break loose from the steel columns, and this started a chain reaction.
So you would expect then from that theory, which is the official theory, to see a whole stack of floors piled up on top of each other and then a spindle of core columns standing too.
The core of each of the Twin Towers consisted of 47 massive steel columns. If the floors had broken loose from them, these columns would have still been sticking up into the air 1,000 feet.
The plane did not cut all those core columns.
We designed the buildings to take the impact of the Boeing 707 hitting the building at any location.
The building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners.
That the plane flew straight into the building.
Through him, right. Yeah.
So you're saying that the building was actually designed to cope with a hole like that and still survive?
Yeah, it was.
If you had dropped, say, a billiard ball from the top of the World Trade Center, 110 floors up there, it would have taken 8 to 10 seconds to hit the ground, encountering no resistance whatsoever.
The Twin Towers came down in nearly free fall speed. 200,000 tons of steel shatters and explodes outwards over 500 feet.
This means that floors shattered at an average rate of about 10 floors per second.
There is no scenario for a pancake effect of buildings falling that allows them to fall at the rate of free fall.
Now what can do that? What can move mass out of the way? Explosives.
Heard the noise associated with an implosion.
Secondary explosion on Tower 2.
Some sort of explosive device.
We're obviously having a bit of trouble right now maintaining our location because we just heard one more explosion.
There was another major explosion.
Do you know anything about those extra explosions we heard?
No, I do not.
Were they car bombs?
I have no idea, ma'am.
The string shook, and I heard like an explosion.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse? To me, it sounded like an explosion. We heard a very loud blast, an explosion. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt. Not clear now is why this explosion took place. When there was some sort of collapse or explosion,
from street level, as though it had exploded up, a giant rolling ball of flame, and the firefighters screamed, "Run!"
It was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm.
and it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building.
You were picked up off the ground?
Physically picked up off the ground.
I remember an explosion. At that point, I got knocked out. I don't remember anything. Then I got up, and I looked out the window because the windows exploded, and the street below caved in. And at that point, there was like fireballs coming up.
An hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that.
About 15 minutes after they made their entry, we heard a boom. I don't know if that was the infrastructure that was going or another explosion.
Again, there has been a second explosion.
John, just seconds ago there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
All of a sudden I heard rumbling, and we all started running away from it. The glass like blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for like 20 seconds.
It was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on the mezzanine level there. And another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion.
So I was real lucky. I don't know what happened to the people behind me when that blast occurred.
And was actually on the 78th floor of the second tower, and was evacuating the tower, and experienced all these explosions and made his way back down.
We presume because of the initial explosion, there may have been secondary explosions as well that were detonated in the building by these terrorists.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. I ran inside the buildings, the chandelier shook, and again, black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes, we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
Eyewitnesses also reported that explosions had taken place in lower levels of both the North and South Tower.
They were having coffee in the World Trade Center when the first plane struck.
And all of a sudden it sounded like, I don't know where the subway is, but it sounded like a subway collision, a bomb, and it was just pounding, boom, 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 and I literally thought the subway had exploded. And
the ladies that are with me were in the World Trade Center in the first building and escaped through the lobby where they report they believe there was a bomb in the lobby.
Just get out of the tunnel and the blue.
The subway tunnel?
Yeah.
Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement, came down, all of a sudden the elevator blew up, smoke. I dragged the guy out, his skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out to the ambulance.
And when I got up to the concourse level, it was just like, like gunfire, and then just three big explosions.
And even the turnstile was burnt and was sticking up, and they just told us to run.
I heard the first explosion, and the elevator blew up.
And as we were coming out, we passed the lobby. There was no lobby. So I believe the bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds then the first plane hit.
Our office was on the B1 level. As I was talking to a supervisor at 8:46, and all of a sudden we hear, boom! An explosion so hard that pushed us upwards. And it came from the basement between the B2 level and the B3 level. And when I went to verbalize, we hear, boom! The impact of the plane on the top.
As I'm walking by the main freight corridor building in the corridor, that's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening. All of a sudden, a big impact happened again, and all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling. You know, you got to go clear across the whole from 1 to 2 World Trade Center, and then all of a sudden it happened all over again. Something else hit us to the floor. Right in the basement, you felt it. Walls were caving in, everything that was going on. I mean, I know of people that got killed in the basement. I know of people that got broken legs in the basement. People that got reconstructive surgery because the walls hit them in the face.
On 9/11, New York City lost 343 firefighters at the World Trade Center. Since they were the ones inside the towers before and as they collapsed, I'd say they've got a pretty good grasp on what happened. So what does the FDNY think?
I went around by the freight elevator and I could see it was just blown. It was just a giant ship. 30th floor. We hear another explosion. And at that time we heard a huge explosion.
Firefighter Louis Caccioli told People Weekly, I was taking firefighters up in the elevator to the 24th floor to get in position to evacuate workers. On the last trip up, a bomb went off. We think there were bombs set in the building. For more than a year, the Port Authority blocked the release of a tape of firefighters' transmissions from the World Trade Center on 9/11. In November 2002, the tape was finally released to the New York Times and other news outlets. Why did it take so long to get the tape released?
September 11, 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 September the 11th, September the 11th. Evil killers, Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden. War and danger. Weapons of mass destruction. Terror, 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 terrorism, 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 global terrorism, global terrorism, world terrorism, global terrorism, global terrorism, global terrorism, global terrorism, the terrorists, 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 the evil terrorists.
Terrorism. The words are hypnotically repeated. Terrorism, terrorist, terrorist threat, and of course, believed to be linked to Al-Qaeda. But it's the so-called war on terrorism that's in our faces practically 24/7 as the inescapable focus of our existence.
One day, our grandchildren will look back on this time and ask, how was the war on terror won?
The entire U.S. ruling class, ruling elite, comes to see terrorism as the preferred means, indeed the only means, to provide social cohesion, to provide an enemy image for the society to keep it together. According to neocon theory from Carl Schmitt, you have to have an enemy image in order to have a society. It's a very dangerous thing because now it means that the entire social order, the political parties, intellectual life, politics in general, all based on a monstrous myth. Monstrous myth.
So there was no network?
No.
No.
Probably not.
We invented it.
Invention's too strong a term. I think we projected it. We projected our own worst fears, and that what we see is a fantasy that's being created.
Al-Qaeda is a global network with global reach.
To target a deadly web of terror.
The idea, which is critical to the FBI's prosecution, that bin Laden ran a coherent organization with operatives and cells all around the world, of which you could be a member, is a myth. There is no Al-Qaeda organization. There is no international network with a leader, with cadres who will unquestioningly obey orders, with tentacles that stretch out to sleeper cells in America, in Africa, in Europe. That idea of a coherent, structured terrorist network with an organised capability simply does not exist.
And there are several key mind manipulation techniques which are very, very powerful propaganda tools. The most effective and the most powerful, and it's used on us all the time, is something I call problem, reaction, solution. It's a cracker, this one. It's a mind manipulation technique that avoids not only opposition to what is the goal of the manipulators, it actually manipulates people to demand they do what they want to do anyway. And it's happening all the time. Once you see this technique and how it works, you watch the news and read the newspapers in a completely different light because you start to see it happening. It works like this. You start by secretly creating a problem in the world and making sure someone else is blamed for it in the public arena, in the public mind. It could be a run on a currency, it could be a government collapse. At its most extreme, it could be a war, because the 2 world wars in this century were funded, all sides were funded by the same people. Provable. The same people that funded the Allies in the Second World War and funded the Soviet Union also funded Hitler. Why would they do that? Why would someone want to fund all sides in a war? What is good is a war? Well, first of all, on one level, it makes vast amounts of money if you're lending money to all sides and you're also selling them lots of arms and all that stuff. But the fundamental reason for a war is to change the nature of post-war society. And what we saw in the First World War and the Second World War were massive global examples of problem, reaction, solution, which work like this. The problem's created secretly. You then use the media, which isn't difficult, to wind up public opinion in relation to your manufactured problem to the point where public opinion utters the classic words, something must be done, this can't go on, which is always followed by, give my power away, what are they going to do about it? And at that point, those who created the problem and got someone else to be blamed for it wound up that public reaction, then openly in the public arena, in the parliaments of the world, in the newspapers and on the television, offer the solutions to the problems they have created. And in doing so, they get vast numbers of people to demand what they want to do anyway. For instance, if you want more cameras in the streets, crikey, they're going up all over the place in Britain. If you want more cameras in the streets, you want a more armed police force, you want more authoritarian laws, greater erosions of freedom, and you want the public to demand you do it, then get the public frightened of crime. Either let society break down so there is more crime, or emphasize crime to be worse than it really is in some areas. Get people frightened, and the first thing people do when they're in fear about something is they look for someone out there to protect them from what they're frightened of. So, get people frightened that they're going to be burgled, get people frightened they're going to be mugged in the street, and they'll demand you take the freedoms away. They'll demand cameras in the streets and more authoritarian laws.
Yeah, there is a war on freedom, and we're being told over and over and over again that we need to support George Bush, and we have to support the war in Iraq, and we have to support this war on terror, and we have to support all these laws that are coming by because, of course, they're all here to protect us. And yet, when you look at things like the Patriot Act, this allows the FBI or any law enforcement agency to utilize what they call sneak and peek. They can go into your house when you're not home, and they can go through all of your stuff and without your ever knowing about it. How is this protecting your rights? That's just one example where we get to think we're free. You know, on the patriotic holidays, we all break out our flags and we wave them around and we sing patriotic songs like I'm proud to be an American, or I get to think I'm free.
We have a program known as Echelon, where they listen to every telephone call, every email, record every fax here in the United States. And all of this is done by computers. All of these messages are kept indefinitely on computer disks. What the American people must understand is that the massive amounts of money we're spending on defense is not to protect America, but ultimately to be used to control the American population as we move from freedom to fascism.
Currently in the United States, unannounced to most brainwashed Americans, your home can be searched without a warrant, without you being home. You can in turn be arrested with no charges revealed to you, detained indefinitely with no access to a lawyer, and legally tortured, all under the suspicion that you might be a terrorist. If you need a painted picture of what is happening in this country, let's recognize how history repeats itself. In February 1933, Hitler staged a false flag attack, burning down his own German parliament building, the Reichstag, and blamed it on communist terrorists. Within the next few weeks, he passed the Enabling Act, which completely eradicated the German Constitution, destroying people's liberties. He then led a series of preemptive wars, all justified to the German people as necessary to maintaining homeland security. This is Aaron Russo, a filmmaker and former politician. To his left is Nicholas Rockefeller of the infamous Rockefeller banking and business dynasty. After maintaining a close friendship with Nicholas Rockefeller, Aaron eventually ended the relationship, appalled by what he had learned about the Rockefellers and their ambitions.
I got a call one day from an attorney woman I knew, and she said, "Would you like to meet one of the Rockefellers?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And we became friends, and he began to divulge a lot of things to me. So he said to me one night, he said that there's going to be an event there, and out of that event, you're going to see we're going to go into Afghanistan, so we can run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We're going to go into Iraq to take the oil and establish a base in the Middle East, and we're going to go into Venezuela and try and get rid of Chavez. And the first two they've accomplished. Chavez they didn't accomplish. And he said you're going to see guys going into caves looking for looking for people that they're never going to find. You know, he was laughing about the fact that you have this war on terror. There's no real enemy. He's talking about how by having this war on terror, you can never win it because it's an eternal war. And so you can always keep taking people's liberties away. And I said, how are you going to convince people that this war is real? He said, but the media. The media can convince everybody it's real. I mean, you know, it's just that you keep talking about things, you keep saying it over and over and over again, and eventually people believe it. You know, you created the Federal Reserve in 1913 through lies. You create 9/11, which is another lie. Through 9/11, then you're fighting a war on terror, and now all of a sudden you go into Iraq, which was another lie, and now they're going to do Iran. You know, and it's all one thing leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. Now, I would say, what are you doing this for? What's the point of this thing? You have all the money in the world you ever want. You have all the power. I said, you know, you're hurting people. It's not a good thing. And he would say, what do you care about the people for? Take care of yourself and you take care of your family. And then I said to him, what are the ultimate goals here? He said, the ultimate goal is to get everybody in this world chipped with the RFID chip and have all money be on those chips and everything on those chips. And if anybody wants to protest what we do or violate what we want, we just turn off their chip. Just turn off their chip. Just turn off their chip. Just turn off their chip.
The goal of this manipulation, and has been for a very long time, is to get the world population, or that majority of it anyway, to see as a good idea, or the only option in given circumstances that are manipulated into place, the creation of a one-world government to which nation-states would be principalities, administrative units, a world central bank which would administer all financial transactions on the planet, a world currency which wouldn't be coins and notes, it would be merely electronic, cashless society for which there are fundamental implications for freedom, as we'll see as we go along tonight. A world army under centralized control with nation-state armies dismantled under the justification of seeking peace, and a microchipped population linked to a global computer, the latter of which sounds bizarre to many people on first hearing, except that we are ridiculously close to it and the technology already exists.
That's right, microchipped. In 2005, Congress, under the pretense of immigration control and the so-called war on terrorism, passed the Real ID Act, under which it is projected by May 2008, you will be required to carry around a federal identification card, which includes on it a scannable barcode with your personal information. However, this barcode is only an intermediary step before the card is equipped with a Verichip RFID tracking module, which will use radio frequencies to track your every move on the planet. If this sounds foreign to you, please note that the RFID tracking chip is already in all new American passports. And the final step is the implanted chip, which many people have already been manipulated into accepting under different pretenses.
We have a Florida family who are really pioneers in a brave new world. They have volunteered to be the first ever to have microchip identification devices implanted into their body.
After 9/11, I was really concerned with the security of my family.
I wouldn't mind having something planted permanently in my arm that would identify me.
In the end, everybody will be locked into a monitored control grid where every single action you perform is documented. And if you get out of line, they can just turn off your chip, for at that point in time, every single aspect of society will revolve around interactions with the chips. This is the picture that is painted for the future if you open your eyes to see it. A centralized one-world economy where everyone's moves and everyone's transactions are tracked and monitored, all rights removed.
Something has to change, though. They have to find a better way to identify the bad guys, or the rest of us are going to stay home and watch the world go by on television. But we need some system for permanently identifying safe people. Most of us are never going to blow anything up, and there's got to be something better than one of these photo IDs, a tattoo somewhere maybe. I wouldn't mind having something planted permanently in my arm that would identify me. If we don't do something, people are going to stop flying. If they stop flying, and I don't go to the Giants games, it means the bastards have won.
Yeah, we're not going to let you win, buddy. We saw what you just implied. We're with Al-Qaeda if we don't take the microchip.
Do you know how to keep your children safe? We'll tell you tonight.
In the next year, you'll be able to use your teen's cell phone to locate them 24/7. Younger children will get a small global positioning device hidden in their wristwatch or backpack. And just around the next high-tech corner, an electronic chip like this that can be implanted under your kid's skin.
Let's say children in your community start wearing wristwatches with GPS devices in them. Can't that only be a good thing for the community if it keeps children safe?
I would love that. I mean, what's a parent's fear?
I think it's a parent's obligation to ensure that their children have a chance to mature, to grow, to realize their potential. If it means it's Big Brother, so be it.
You got to do what you got to do to keep your kids safe. Civil libertarians, eat your hearts out.
Civil libertarians, eat your hearts out.
All right, we got the Van Dams, we got this little girl Elizabeth Smart, we got this girl in Pennsylvania, we got Samantha Runyon, we got this other little girl, one after another, after another, after another, after another. And parents around America saying, we can't even allow our kids to play in the front yard. Is there anything, technologically speaking, that they can do that could help in a situation like a kidnapping? Is there, for example, a microchip, a watch, a tracking device we can use for our kids?
We are working on a product that we have called internally a PLD. PLD stands for Personal Locating Device, which is an implantable GPS for which our company owns a patent and can be implanted surgically in the clavicle area of a child or someone that you are interested in tracking. It is the first implantable microchip for humans that has multiple security, financial, and healthcare applications.
One thing I would just suggest, I'm just an outside, soon-to-be investor. I love this idea, by the way, Scott. I think this is great.
Thank you, Sean.
Put it in earrings, put it in a cross, make it smaller, maybe not implantable, and I think let parents choose. It's not the government, so I like it. But
we're currently working on those applications.
By working together, we can win the first war of the 21st century, and that is the war of cold-blooded killers against cold-blooded killers. The first war of the 21st century. cold-blooded killers. Against cold-blooded killers.
The human mind is like a computer. No matter how efficient it may be, its reliability is only as great as the information fed into it. If it is possible to control the inputs of the human mind, then no matter how intelligent a person may be, it's entirely possible to program what he will think. And yes, it's even possible to program people to laugh at the mere mention of the word conspiracy.
Using television as the prime example of how mental programming and mind control works. Television is the most powerful weapon of psychological warfare in history. And yet television, for many people, is a member of the family in the household.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we look at all of those options? What really bothers me about your position and other positions?
There's a movie called Loose Change that asserts hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans colluded to kill their fellow citizens on 9/11. That Al-Qaeda didn't attack us. We essentially attacked ourselves. This fairy tale ranks up there with the Holocaust deniers on the vicious scale.
We are living in a virtual reality. We're living in a totally controlled environment, an environment that has been created by mass media. Now, many people, especially young people, accept unquestioningly the reality that is presented by the media. Popular culture, movies, television, music, carry messages about how society works and how people should behave. The ultimate control is to control people without their conscious awareness. Again, television is a prime example. Think back to whenever you have observed young children or older adults sitting, watching television. They have this glassy-eyed, vacant look in their eyes because they are in a trance state, in a hypnotic state of mind.
Now, as Charlie Sheen ranting like a lunatic about the September 11th attacks, now word comes that Sheen will be narrating a new film about 9/11 conspiracy theories. Joining us now, nationally syndicated radio talk show host Mike.
They do not want you to think too much. That is why our country and our world has become so proliferated with entertainments, mass media, television shows, amusement parks, drugs, alcohol, and every kind of entertainment to keep the human mind entertained so that you don't get in the way of important people by doing too much thinking. You had better wake up and understand that there are people who are guiding your life and you don't even know it.
So there, we have figured it out. Go back to bed, America. Your government has figured out how it all transpired. Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control again. Here's American gladiators. Watch this. Shut up. Go back to bed, America. Here is American gladiators. Here is 56 channels of it. Watch these pituitary retards bang their fucking skulls together and congratulate you on living in the land of freedom. Here you go, America. You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you. Oh, good. Honey, I heard on the news that they figured out that the gun, what happened is that there is an echo and that Kennedy was asking Jackie what it was, and that's why his head flew up. Honey, what time's Gladiators on? Are we missing it? Woo, I'm so glad we're free, honey.
There has been a long-held consolidation of ownership of the different medias, press, publishing, film, music, television, consolidated ownership into the hands of very few individuals, the multinational corporations. Today, there are a half a dozen multinational corporations that are controlling the information and entertainment choices that people have.
The truth of the matter is that increasingly what we see, what we hear, and what we read is being controlled by fewer and fewer large multinational corporations.
People don't appreciate this. You know, in the last days of the Soviet Union,
You had dozens of newspapers, dozens of magazines, all kinds of radio and television stations. The only problem is that all of that media was controlled by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union or the government of the Soviet Union. We are moving in that direction.
There is an illusion of choice that's maintained when you can have 100 channels on your cable system, and how many movies did the studios release a year now? All these different studios, and the music industry with so many labels, and magazine stands that go on and on and on forever. Well, the owners are a handful, 5, 6 different companies.
90% of the top cable channels are owned by the same giants that own the TV networks and the cable systems. More channels are great, but when they're all owned by the same people, cable doesn't advance localism, editorial diversity, and competition. And those who believe the internet alone will save us from this fate should realize that the dominating internet news sources are controlled by the same media giants who control radio, TV, newspapers, and cable.
Okay, we say we've got freedom of press in this country, and some folks have said that you've got freedom of press as long as you own it. Well, who owns the media? And when I say that, I mean it not literally, but as far as who controls the information that goes out in the media. An example, NBC is owned by General Electric, and General Electric is one of the top 10, if not top 5 defense contractors. Is NBC going to expose a news story that might in some way impede a contract negotiation, which can mean a lot of money for General Electric? I don't think so. So the point here is that we have elected officials, both Republicrats and Demopublicans, that cater to who? Certainly not the common people. We don't have the huge amounts of money to contribute to their election campaigns. The people that contribute the most amount of money are the corporations. And so that representative or senator is going to do what is going to be in the best interest of those corporations. So if the corporations are controlling and influencing our elected officials, we must also take a look at the mainstream media. Who pays the bulk of the advertising dollars that keep the mainstream network news going? Is the major corporations. So what we have now is we have corporate control of elected officials, corporate control of the media, and this is why some people are now calling it the corporate Borg, because they have assimilated several different areas of our entire society. The corporations control agriculture, technology, manufacturing, industry, education, communication. They control our elected officials. This is not a government of, by, and for the people. It is a government of, by, and for the corporation. And by definition, when business controls government, that is inescapably fascism.
Now, there are two primary means by which people are manipulated and controlled. One is very simple, very basic, and that is simply the control of information and the control of, if we don't have all of the facts on any particular topic, then our judgment is going to be no better than the quality of our information.
America forms its opinions by information that's provided to them.
You're trying to do, so you have to brainwash.
If you sat around a table and you said, right, what we need to do is we need to find some way of getting young people to see the world the way we want them to see it, so that by the time they become adults, they are completely following the reality we want them to believe in. Someone might say, well, they might not have it but you know the ideal thing? What we do is we have a system where we take children away from their parents at least 5 days a week, all day, from about the age of 4 and 5, and we have control of their minds until they're about 17, 18. That would be ideal. Well, of course, that's what happens. Yeah. It's called the education system. Yes. And it's indoctrination.
Schooling is a form of adoption. You give your kid away to a group of strangers. You accept a promise, sometimes stated and more often implied, that the state, through its agents, knows better how to raise your children and educate them than you, your neighbors, your grandparents, your local traditions do. And that your kid will be better off so adopted. By the time the child returns to the family or has the option of doing that, very few want to. Their parents are some form of friendly stranger too, and why not? In the key hours of growing up, strangers have reared the kid. Now let's look at the strangers, of which you were one and I was one. Regardless of our good feeling toward children, regardless of our individual talents or intelligence, we have so little time each day with each of these kids, we can't possibly know enough vital information about that particular kid to tailor a set of exercises to that kid. So what we do is accept, and of course if we don't accept this, we're fired or harassed. We accept a state's prescription that's written in manuals. You do this first, and this second, and this third. And the way the state checks on whether you've followed that diet is there's standardized tests given at intervals. If your kids do badly, it does not mean that they're bad readers or anything else. It means that they haven't been obedient to the drills the state set down, and they're marked for further treatment later on, or they're marked to be excluded from responsible jobs. Perhaps some ways by being excluded from the colleges that lead to responsible jobs, in other ways from the licenses that lead to responsible jobs. This was all worked out. It didn't evolve by a lot of rational people saying, we'll take this, this, and this from the past, then the next generation will take this, this, and this. This was set down largely in a handful of places.
I think it's important to understand that most of the educational programs that are implemented in the United States stem from the National Education Association. And the NEA was actually founded by John D. Rockefeller. And John D. Rockefeller, I think, voiced the beliefs of this ruling elite that wants to try to homogenize our education system when he was quoted as saying, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. So I think the education system is not only pushing people into a socialized version of government, but also dumbing the individual down to the point to where he'll be a good worker in the factory, or he'll be a good worker in Silicon Valley. He may know a lot about computers, but he is not going to have a classic education that would allow him to take all of the facets of the culture and the society and put it together and really form an intelligent opinion as to what's really going on and what might be in the best interest of the individual.
Now let's shift to the basis of your question, which is Rockefeller and Carnegie and J.P. Morgan. These people saw a different kind of utopia. They thought that this material abundance, since they had abandoned a belief in a creator or an afterlife, this material abundance was the best that a human life could aim for. And to do that, the family had to be moved off center stage, and the children had to be processed like raw materials. These are the people who saw to it with their influence that when legislation that was wildly radical based on any past model was proposed, that the right legislators would vote that legislation through. They saw to it that money was available to build these vast piles of brick and stone and to drain children out of the community by the force of law, mind you, because they don't teach the way children learn, nor can they teach the way children learn, That's not what they're set up to do. They're set up to produce a predictable, homogeneous, safe product. They're set up to sort people into occupational categories, roughly consonant with what the current economy demands.
The whole system, because we have two hemispheres of the brain, the left brain, which is about words and this world reality and, you know, the perception of this reality. We have the right brain, which is where you get creativity, inspiration, and connection, and then you've got this corpus callosum, which connects the two. First of all, we use a fraction of our brains. Why is that? And the other thing is that what the system does is it turns out left brain prisoners. They run the system. And it does it by putting information through schools and colleges and universities into the left brain, which it then says at time of an exam, give me all that back, and if you tell me what I've told you well enough to believe, then you'll pass the exam and you'll be very successful. Anyone that takes that information into the right brain and puts their spin on it, or questions it, or sees through it, and puts that in the exam, they are perceived as a disruptive influence in the classroom.
Yes, they are.
And so what happens is, for you to become a doctor, overwhelmingly a politician, a journalist, someone often in industry, all these areas that control the system.
The professions.
The professions.
Yeah.
Lawyers.
Yes.
I mean, on and we go. You have to have gone through your young life constantly taking information into your left brain and regurgitating it out on exam papers. To become a teacher, you have to go through that process. Then you go through teacher training college, where you're taught how to do it to others, and then you're let loose on the children. Yes. The whole system is run by left brain prisoners. And if you look at the school system, things like music and art that stimulate this side of the brain, the uniqueness, they are constantly cut back in favor of left brain curriculums. And this is systematic. I have to get this over to people. This is not systematic at the level of, you know, people who administer it into reality. It is coldly calculated in the shadowy areas where these concepts first come from. Yeah. And they know what they're doing.
A lot of the constraints on us, a lot of the strings that hold us like puppets are really inventions of our own mind. I'm not saying that there aren't armies and police and various ways to punish deviants, but there isn't any way to punish a large number of deviants. There isn't any way to do that. It's too expensive to even try to do it unless you can colonize the minds of children growing up so they become their own police. And they will report other children who are deviating.
It is the greatest lesson for me, and I think for everybody else, to know that we're on the winning side and that we win in the end.
You are not our queens. You are not our kings. You are not our gods. We do not belong to you. We are not your slaves. We stand as free humans and stood from the beginning of time against the strong men, against the thugs, against the bullies. We will defeat your world government. We will defeat world taxation. We will defeat your control grid.
You like being a puppet, sir? You like being a puppet for the New World Order? Oh, stop. You don't like that. Hey, you're going to talk about 60,000 people? You're going to talk about 60,000 people? We don't want to hear this nonsense.
How do the American people know that 9/11 was a stage, was engineered by you, David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, and Bilderberg Group, sir? How do you know it was a stage? Okay. It's a question. Answer my question. You're a CFR scum. You are CFR New World Order scum. You and David Rockefeller will never have a New World Order. 9/11 was an inside job, and Brzezinski is responsible for it. 9/11 is an inside job. You are responsible for Brzezinski. You will never get a New World Order. Never. National sovereignty will prevail. The New World Order is going down, sir. You can laugh. Wake up, people. Wake up. Research the New World Order. This is important. Look it up. Investigate it.
How did you let this happen? Wake up out there. You know, it's your children. Don't you care? Look what these people are doing to you.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down and round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up. We have a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account and my family. This has to be real. It's just a ride. But we always kill those good guys who try and tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok? But it doesn't matter, because it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. A choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear, once you put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love, instead, see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now, to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever in peace. Thank you very much. You've been great. I hope you enjoyed it. London, you're fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sisters and brothers, we have surely lost our way. In strip malls full of cancer and a pathetic rain. Lover, sweet lover, please don't discipline your hands.
what we've done is got so focused, so much self-identifying with the body, the vehicle to experience this reality, that we have forgotten that we are all that is. We are an expression of that, if you like, God, that infinite consciousness. And when we lose that understanding that we are that infinite consciousness, that's when we get into trouble, because we start identifying with the small instead of the all. And that's when we get into the little game mentality that leads to conflict and war and I'm right and you're wrong and all this stupidity and this race and that race. It's all so stupid, and it's losing this understanding that we are this infinite consciousness and identifying with the little mentality of the body vehicle. That's what's got us into trouble. And when we reverse that, then the trouble will disappear. We are now in a time, we're at a fork in the road, where we can go on the way we have been, believing what people tell us, believing what the authorities tell us, believing what the mainstream media tell us, which is merely what the system tells them to tell us. Or we can take another route of this fork in the road and start to wake up to the true magnitude of who we are and the true nature of reality and how we create it, and therefore how we can be manipulated to create a reality that suits those that wish to suppress us. That's the fork in the road, and a lot of people are going down the route to awakening now, and it's fantastic. I feel just that this is the cusp of enormous change and enormous mass understanding of what's going on. And these next few years, you mentioned in your introduction earlier how glad you are to be alive at this time. Well, so am I, because we are going to see terrific challenges and also terrific change. And in the end, it's going to be a positive change, because humanity is going to wake up from its amnesic state, and it's going to remember who it is, where it is, and the true nature of what it is, which is infinite genius consciousness.